Mehdi Hasan adds how serious he takes the third-party threat to a Biden administration. And he talks, it's about a 5-minute segment. Let's listen and discuss. The two of you can just let me know whenever you want to stop it. Just say, hey, pause it here, and I'll pause it. So let's listen.
I wanted to ask you about the argument on no labels. I just figured this out because I'm slow. But if you take Ralph Nader's 2 or 3% away from the 2000 election and Jill Stein's 2 or 3% away from the 2016 election, I think it's quite possible that Democrats would have won every election this century. The question is, assuming, of course, in 2004 that it would have been Gore running for re-election and not George W. Bush, who won in part because of Ralph Nader. How serious do you take this third-party threat? And what's the best argument? As I'm always listening to you, your book, Win Every Argument, it's an incredible book. What is the best argument when you're talking to no labels, trying to dissuade them or trying to encourage them to move in one direction or the other?
Well, first of all, I agree with Tom that we should be very concerned about the prospect of a second Trump term. Anyone who thinks Donald Trump can't win next time round is not paying attention, wasn't paying attention to the margins in places like Wisconsin in 2020, doesn't understand how American politics works, which is fundamentally a two-party system. And then there's a few swing voters and a few people who want to vote third party. I think the third party threat is very serious. It's always been very serious. I don't think it just comes from no labels and a Joe Manchin type, but it also comes from someone like a Cornel West, who I personally have a lot of time for his politics, but I think it's bad for the left to vote for Cornel West when fascism is at the door. And Cornel West himself in 2020 said fascism was at the door and didn't run third party then.
I want to really emphasize some of what he's saying. He's saying that the status quo, the way things are of the Democrats and the Republicans, is the best way of being. And I think that if the status quo is where we are today, what he's saying is we continue as we are today because that's what we want. But that's not what a lot of people want. And this constant fighting about who's voting for who, when we have the electoral college that is problematic also to start with, it's like, who's not voting? Who wouldn't have voted if this other person was on the ballot? And that's been the Green, a lot of what's shared within Green Spaces is, that you get a lot of non-voters that are voting when this additional candidate is. And if America is really, truly a democracy, and if that's what we want to be as a democracy, it means everybody's showing up and everybody's voting their heart and their minds, not accepting the status quo system that we currently have. So, sorry, it just really resonated with that with me. So.
No, I also wanted to stop it in a similar place because he makes the comment of he think it's a mistake that the left would be voting or supporting Cornel West at a time like this with fascism right at the doorstep. I just don't think this is an effective argument anymore. We've lived through both presidencies, Joe Biden and Trump, so it's just not the most effective selling point of a Biden administration to say Trump worse. You can't tell us. We can just reflect back to what it was. You know what I mean? Like, so there's no fearing that you can do anymore. And then to say fascism at the door, when at the same time the Democrats are the ones in power that's instilling fascism through social media. The Democrats are in power, are the ones that's marching us to war with two nuclear powers, and so on and so on. The funding of the military. I mean, I can just keep going on. It's bizarre. It's so ineffective because the Democrats are in power doing so much bad stuff. I guess that's an easier way of saying it. Professor, it looks like you were going to chime in. Go ahead.
I don't know. It always looks like that for me. I feel like exactly Jay and Michelle, I'm just going to echo that. But what the hell is fascism? We don't even define our terms. Not us, them. Yes. So fascism is at the door. And I do think it merits repeating what Democrats have done in joining with Republicans to push a fascist agenda, a neoliberal, fascist, authoritarian agenda. I mean, it started before this, but a point I go back to is 2006 when Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House again, halfway through George Bush's second term. And the question was, would impeachment be on the table? Because George Bush lied about spying on Americans, listening to our phone calls, reading our emails without warrants, illegally, unconstitutionally, violation of the Fourth Amendment, a whole bunch of other stuff. And the first thing she said when she became Speaker in 2006 was, impeachment is off the table. So Democrats did not hold Republicans accountable for a massive surveillance program which was unconstitutional and continues today. And then Obama becomes president, and in the 2012 Defense Authorization Act, signs that into law, even though it includes indefinite detention of anyone, including American citizens, without charge or trial. Literally, Obama overturned habeas corpus in the United States. That's fascism. And now what you're talking about, CJ, you mentioned with the censorship. Absolutely. The government is controlling the town square, which is social media, yes, and not letting people speak. We have fascism here. And the question I would love to see Cornel West ask, or somebody to these people, is how many Americans voted to send $130, $140 now billion to Ukraine for a proxy war? Who voted for that? Why do we never get to discuss it? Because, you know, Hitler didn't consult with the German people when he rolled into Poland in 1939. Well, what's going on here? Nobody's consulting with us about this. And the majority of American people don't want to give any more money to Ukraine. Fascism is here. We have to define what it is and talk about it. So we're not preventing it. I mean, what's Trump going to do? At January 6th aside, which is a whole discussion, he didn't rule. Trump was a fairly less than competent president when it came to getting his agenda passed. He wasn't very effective. He didn't do things. He just didn't. He wasn't. I mean, and that's good. But like, the difference between his rhetoric and our perception of him, Democrats' perception of him, the media's perception of Trump, and the way he ruled for 4 years, he didn't do. He talked a good game if you're a conservative, right? But he didn't really dictatorial get that agenda through. And it's a good thing, but he wasn't very effective at it. So what are we afraid of? And I think that people need to talk about it, because there's these assumptions that are made. Trump's a fascist. Republicans are fascists. They hate democracy. We have to stop them. Well, let's talk about it, because I want to talk about why is it still okay that you are listening to my phone calls and reading my emails? That's fucking fascist. And why is nobody running on stopping it? Why does that never get overturned? There's no breakdowns in these conversations. They never drill down. They just throw the words out.
Absolutely. And we can continue with the video. I don't think I have to refresh it. It looks like it's going to play. Let's see.
I
take your point on 2000 with Ralph Nader.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I want to kind of add to something that Professor said, which is we also don't see layers of fascism that exist, because the one area where Trump did do enormous harm, well, there's two areas. One is the judges that are appointed. The second one is disabled people. The public benefits that we rely on, Trump added certain programs and processes that still haven't fully been unwound. And those are the layers of fascism that we cannot see when they're enacted outside of our knowledge base, that we really also need to remember, because I have to sit with a bunch of disabled voters, that people with disabilities that will vote blue no matter who, because the risks of allowing the Republicans to be in power impact us greatly. I want to see a better system created that will make sure that people can vote who they want to vote for and not have to worry about the harms that are going to happen from one party or the other party being in power. And it brings up the whole element of why people don't see fascism. It's because a lot of times the fascism that's been going on since the foundation of this country has been pretty firmly rooted in Black and brown communities and in the immigrant communities, those communities designated as other, and that's where we can look away from the fascism because it's not in our bubble, and we need to start looking towards the people that have experienced the fascism and let them run with what the definition actually is so that we get more change over time.
Great point again. And let's continue.
Joe, 2016, I think, is a little bit more complicated because it's not just Jill Stein. There's Gary Johnson, who was taking votes away from Trump. So there's an argument about whether Stein and Johnson canceled each other out. We'll never really know. But look, the third-party candidate threat is very real, even going back to Ross Perot in the early 90s. I would say this about no labels. You want to talk about us being on different sides. Let me say this where I disagree with you, Joe. You're far too generous to the no labels people. When you say, I don't agree, I don't question their motives or their intentions. I do. I don't know what the hell it is. I mean, Molly puts the point, hope they're naive. It's at best a vanity campaign. At worst, it is a kind of right-wing op. Joe Manchin spent years undermining Joe Biden's presidency, undermining the Democrats in the Senate. And now, after saying, it's rubbish, it's BS that I'll leave the party, he's now considering a no-labels presidential run. What I would say to someone who pushes this line, and there are a lot of ordinary Americans out there who do say, look, I just want someone in the middle. I want this kind of bipartisan age, Donnie sided the polls. I would say one very simple thing. That person exists. His name is Joseph Robinette Biden. He is the guy of moderate bipartisan dreams.
It's just the reselling of Joe Biden for Mehdi Hasan. So Mehdi Hasan is coming on to say not only is no labels third party a problem, you're a problem in a different way. You're a problem. So he's saying two things at the same time. Let's get what he's saying. At the same time, he's saying no labels, we don't need you because you're looking for a middle ground. Joe Biden, moderate of all moderates. And while at the same time, Cornel West, we don't need you because Joe Biden has been doing some progressive things, getting some progressive goals accomplished. Now, I don't know. Oh, yeah, he doesn't say that in this video, but in previous videos. So he's saying two things at the same time about Joe Biden trying to advocate for him or trying to advocate against anyone else joining the race. Are you familiar, Michelle, with a lot of Mehdi Hasan's politics, or this is like one of the first times you've heard of him?
I think that I see him on my Twitter feed when the people I follow shared the videos, and while I can, it's similar. I don't really. There's only so much bandwidth my brain has with this. The vote blue no matter who, or we're gonna make better out of the world of that already doesn't exist. So I think that he's been kind of, I probably shouldn't say that. He's been kind of not on my periphery by my choice. It's I listen when I see things, when I watch your streams, when I watch RBN streams, I hear some of these tidbits and these little bits of things. But I also have my own little BS meter that says, okay, I'm not going to waste my time on his stuff right now because I'm busy doing all these other things, which does limit my reach some because there are just some things I don't have the time and energy to focus on this day or that day. So, yeah.
No, and that could be a good thing in many ways that you are unplugged. I mean, I say that a lot about a lot of stories too. But in this case, Mehdi Hasan, who is supposedly, now he's brought on as the supposed progressive. So in the context of that, this is where he's not playing a admirable role for the left to come on to shield for Biden. And that's what he's doing. I'm gonna let the video play out, and then we can get a couple more comments and move to the next topic here.
In 2020, he wasn't my guy. He wasn't. People like me who were more progressive were like, is Joe Biden really? But we recognize now in office, he is the guy he claimed to be. He's the guy who wants to be the centrist, the moderate. He wants to reach out across the aisle. He calls Republicans his friends. He exists, right? You couldn't make him in a lab. Joe Biden is that guy who sings the praises of bipartisanship at a time when one of our two parties is neo-fascistic. So I'm not sure what more these kind of independent, centrist, quote unquote moderates want when Joe Biden already is running for president again.
Well, and you know, it's what I've always said to my friends that have said, "Oh, Biden," my Republican friends, "Oh, Biden, he's left wing, he's a Marxist." Are you kidding me? The biggest knock on Joe Biden was he was too kind to the banks and the credit card companies. He was the senator from corporate Delaware, and I will say this, the progressives pre-Biden always got the knock of being unrealistic. I have been absolutely blown away by the discipline on people that I would consider to be on the far left of the Democratic Party. They have shown more discipline.
Listen to this last part that he makes the point about the squad, elected progressives, AOC, Bernie Sanders.
Dealing with a guy, Mehdi, who is extraordinarily moderate. He really is. If you look at where we are between the left and the Democratic Party and the right and the Republican Party, he really is the moderate. He ran against 14, 15 progressives in 2020. And they said, we'll take the moderate.
Joe, what I would say is, you look at AOC. AOC has said in the past that in a European country, her and Joe Biden wouldn't be in the same party, right? And yet AOC has come out and endorsed Joe Biden for re-election, taking a lot of flack from some activists on the left. But the reality...
Now, understand, this is, I'm using this opportunity because I made this point before. When they use the term activist, they're using it as a slur. They're using it as a slur when he says activists or when they say online people, online left, that's another, the way they're using it is as a slur. I don't, it's like whatever to me, but this is where AOC is playing the role of that she understands and accepts she's playing the role for the establishment. People are able to point to her. This is the exact reason she came out and this is the exact reason why I say this kind of solidifies her as an establishment figure when she comes out and says, yes, I'm endorsing Joe Biden on the same day that they're announcing cluster munitions, is that she's fully accepted the role of being the person that people can reference. Like he references here. He goes, AOC is left. And she even says, in another world, they wouldn't even be in the same party. And look what she did, guys. Look at what she did, everybody. She endorsed Joe Biden herself. You see how reasonable people do it? And that's sort of how she's going to be used, whether she likes it or not. But I think she knows that that's how she's going to be used. And it's just sad. And in a matter of 3 or 4 years, 5 years, however long she's been elected, it's just very quick, this turnaround for me or for my understanding of AOC. 20 seconds, and let's let it play.
Reality is the left understands two things. Number one, there is a fascist threat at the door, number one. And number two, Joe Biden's actually governed in a pretty progressive way and taken on...
Look, didn't I tell you? He governed in a pretty progressive way when he just said there's a moderate. And this is the same segment. He's saying Joe Biden is a moderate and a progressive at the same time to benefit whoever he's talking about. Crazy.
Could on board a lot of Bernie ideas, Warren ideas, and not as many as some of us might like, but more than we thought, and you can build on that.
Just sad to see Mehdi, because at one point he was considered like a good advocate, a person who was stood for something and stood his principle, but obviously ever since going corporate cable, he has completely sort of sold out the idea of progressivism, I think, and also, and the thing is, do these progressives know they're just being used to bash third parties? That's it. They don't care about what you have to say, Mehdi. When's the last time you've been on Morning Joe, Mehdi Hasan, when you advocating for Medicare for all. But when you're talking against the third party, that's when they're going to bring you on. Same with black folks. They do the same thing with black folks. But let's go to Professor, then we'll go to Michelle. Any final words on the segment about what he says about third parties and how he's saying now is not the time? I mean, he's just another person. But this is a supposed progressive that's saying it. And then anything else he says in a video you want to comment on. But go ahead, and then we'll go to Michelle.
Yeah, I don't really believe AOC or Mehdi Hasan were ever progressives. And here's why. Like, you don't just change. Like, what I get people becoming radicalized in a short period of time because there's been an event or something happened that either directly or somewhat directly affected them or that they witnessed. I don't understand people being de-radicalized in just a year or two. Maybe it's the power of the money. See, nobody's ever like dangled 20 million a year in front of me. I don't know how much Mehdi Hasan gets, but like, I will tell you, in the words of Mark Twain, I'm generally against the idea of millionaires, but it might be dangerous to offer me the position. Like, so I don't know. I don't know if they throw it at me. But here's the thing. I kind of know. There's no way AOC ran and said, what's wrong with being a one-term Congress member? Maybe that's what it takes. And all of a sudden, within 2 years, she was like, oh, no, I don't want that. To me, you were always an op. And it's sad for me to say it because I really liked her in the beginning. And I was excited when she and other members of the squad endorsed Bernie. It was exciting for me. And I thought, yes, this is great momentum. And then, you see how they did it? They only Noam Chomsky is really good at describing this. There is only a certain box that we're allowed to talk about, and that's the discussion, a circle of certainty where everything is assumed and known, and this is left and this is right. And nothing else outside of that spectrum exists. It's as if we were looking at, the rainbow, but we were only able to see green and yellow. And then never talk about the other colors. Makes no sense. So they're never allowed, like they can say Mehdi Hasan is left and CJ very clearly points it out, he never talks about Medicare for all. We are in a crisis. 68,000 people, that's like 180-ish people a day, die each year in this country because Democrats and Republicans are addicted to big pharma and big insurance cash. Right? And going to the disabilities piece, of course it affects the more vulnerable people more severely. And we could tomorrow do something about it. Almost 1,000 people froze to death under bridges and sleeping on sidewalks last year. And almost every year, it's about that, 700, 900, 1,000, because we don't have a federal housing guarantee. And we could have done it in a heartbeat with the $24 billion that Joe Biden just promised to Ukraine. 20 billion of it could have housed everybody for the next year. So we know these things. They never talk about it on MSNBC. And sadly, and if I can throw this out, I used to be one of those people who watched every show in the evening lineup of MSNBC. And I get a lot of crap from liberals the attack dogs online who are like, you're an operative for MAGA, you're really a Republican. Dude, I've been a Democrat my whole life. I've always leaned towards socialist, but I kept trying. But I used to watch the lineup from Chris Matthews when he was on.
Me too.
All the way through Lawrence O'Donnell. And then I remember, like, there was a particular story of Israel, this was way back when, boarding an aid ship to the Palestinians and killing aid workers, and they didn't cover it. They didn't talk about it on those shows. And I'm like, that's weird. And then in 2015, when they fired Ed Schultz and really allowed no coverage of Bernie, and I thought, this is weird. And then I realized, oh, it's not weird. This is who they are. But people need to remember MSNBC, when it came out as a station, was conservative when it started. It had really crazy right-wing conservatives on, and the most left person they had on, they did give a show to Phil Donahue, but then they took it off the air, right? They don't have a belief system. None of these people do. if we think this is the world, we're screwed, right? And most people do. Well, this is the discussion. This is not the discussion. You go talk to people, and this is what Cornel West is going to do. He's literally going to go around the country. He's starting, on the 25th, and which is he's going to be talking about Emmett Till's legacy and like why that matters as he launches his campaign. But he's going to be going into Trump country. He's going to be sitting down in coffee shops, having conversations with people, and they don't want that to happen.
Right.
MSNBC especially. But here's the good news. I'll wrap it up. That was long-winded. Nobody is fucking watching MSNBC. Nobody's watching these stations. Fox is leading again, but their numbers aren't great. Cable news is dying. It is dying. It is not what it was. So that's an opportunity for folks like you, right? Independent news to step up because and reach more people. Thank God nobody's listening to these people. Really, it's the professional class. That's it. Not most Americans.
Absolutely. And we'll go to Michelle for no final words and your reaction also to the Mehdi Hasan clip.
I think it's important to realize that within the systems and structures we occupy, the tools have already been weaponized. The words have already been weaponized depending on the climate that we're engaging with at that point in time. Much like Professor said about, when we hear them talk about centrists and leftists and all this other stuff, technically, most of the time, they're not even on point with that. Biden is nowhere near left of center.
Right.
AOC is marginally at the center, maybe. Bernie Sanders was left of center, but he was left of center in a way that was impacted by what membership he held, what system he had to occupy, and what system he had to maneuver within. We take the realities of what we know and we weaponize them against the people that we may not like or we may not agree with, or we may think they're pushing on the wrong button, and that's the climate that we've created in the United States, where instead of me sitting down with another person that makes me feel uncomfortable or that I don't agree with, instead, I get behind the gang of the moment, the bully of the moment, and I use that bully to shield myself from that discomfort. Our medical system, our systems we navigate, they've created this toxic mix of realities, and they're codified by when we say Democrats, when we say Republicans, when we say leftists, centrists, or rightist people, instead of deconstructing those power structures and just starting to talk with the person in front of you and to learn from them, to state, I disagree with you, instead of saying, I'm an enormous white woman that's spouting something that you don't agree with. That's the weapons of the master class. That's the weapons that were brought into this stream today.
Mm-hmm.
People need to realize the power of their words and the fact that those words recreate the struggles that all of us are enduring. And we're all responsible. We're all responsible, even at a time when we're passionate about something and we want to see changes. We are still responsible to be ethical to our human beings around us and to realize where those thoughts come from, because they didn't come from me. I've done some bad things in my life. I've been racist. I've been classist. I've been, I have actively marginalized people in my life when I didn't really realize I was doing it. But that doesn't negate that I have that responsibility to still understand where my actions were and what my actions were accomplishing. But I appreciate being in conversation with you too.